We've known for quite some time now that Weiss's relationship with the majority of her family is a little bit strained, but with episode 4 of Ice Queendom putting that on full display in Weiss's dream, giving us a glimpse as to how Weiss views each and every one of them, it becomes very apparent what Weiss's home life was before she came to Beacon. And that's something I want to discuss in this video, how Weiss views each of her family members, and as a result, get a glimpse into what her home life must have been like before coming to Beacon. We got a good idea in volumes 7 and 8, but this episode and Weiss's dream is very, very telling. So let's start with the most prominent figure in Weiss's dream, that being her father. He is everywhere. There are posters and there are statues scattered all throughout Weiss's empire, all throughout the city within the walls. And the city within the walls is the world that Weiss knows. Her father is everywhere, inescapable. She cannot get away from his criticizing eyes that are always judging her and looking down on her. When we get a glimpse into Weiss's home within the dream, this becomes even more literal, as Jacques appears as a hologram on the ceiling, someone not actually there, not present to talk face-to-face with Weiss, but still a looming presence that is always looking down on Weiss. He offers no hint of kindness, only criticizing Weiss's actions. But that isn't the only perception of Jacques that we see throughout this dream. Weiss knows how Jacques is, has experienced him as a father throughout her entire life, how he is uncaring, cold, and only wants the profits of the company. He only really cares about money. But in the public eye, they're all fooled. They think he's some great man, and that is representative of the statues constantly spewing out the rhetoric that he wants everyone to believe. That it is a privilege to work for the Schnee Dust Company. That Nicholas Schnee was a great man, but it was I, Jacques Schnee, that brought fame and fortune to the Schnee Dust Company. I am employing all of you. You should all be grateful. It is fun to work for the Schnee Dust Company. You should enjoy your lives working as essentially slaves. There is so much present of how Weiss views her father, outwardly to the public being this kind and benevolent figure almost, but when it comes to personal relations with his family, people whose image can also affect his own image, then he is much more critical, much more cold, and very uncaring. The presence that he holds in Weiss's life is overpowering, as he is controlling everything within Weiss's empire, has a say in all of it. And that is why she really wanted to escape at the beginning of the RWBY series, to get out from under his thumb. But as we have seen throughout this dream, she feels that she is unable to do so. With Jacques' presence in the kingdom and her confusion outside of it, that she doesn't know where to go in the outside world, and the only thing she does know is the life that Jacques has given her, making him one of the most prominent figures in Weiss's dream, one of her major insecurities. But not the most major insecurity, at least in my mind, when it comes to her family members. The one that holds the most sway over Weiss is, in fact, at least in my opinion, not Jacques. Instead, it is Winter. Winter is not ever-present like Jacques, represented in posters and statues and everything all across the city. She is only represented by one item in this dream. A book. But a book that Weiss carries with her everywhere, that she follows as the rulebook. She sees her sister as the rulebook to follow, as a law that should be followed to the letter. Whatever her sister says, she clings to every word. We saw that in Volume 3 when Winter was first introduced. Weiss adores her sister, someone who was able to break away from her father, break away from the family, get out from under his thumb. And to Weiss, she is the strong older sister that she wants to follow. Likely, when Weiss was growing up, Winter was probably more of a mother figure to her than her own mother was, as Willow in this dream is represented by a shadow that can only laugh and drink, an absent mother. No human warmth is present in that shadow, but is still a looming presence over Weiss. The shadow appearing larger than Weiss herself, the cackling ever present in Weiss's day-to-day life. Something that she can't escape from, and something that does not give her any comfort or warmth. It is likely that Winter was the one who cared for Weiss a lot when they were kids, especially around the time of Weiss's 10th birthday or so, where Jacques finally told Willow that, yeah, I only married you for the company. So that was probably the point in time where Winter also decided to finally break away from Jacques, but she was also probably the one that was there for Weiss when Willow, let herself go into alcoholism, and Jacques really didn't care anymore about putting on the facade of a kind father. Winter is the rulebook that Weiss follows, and yet she only appears as a shadow in that book, still characterizing the distant relationship that the two of them have. The shadows are, in a sense, inhuman. They carry some human emotions with them, but there is no warmth present there, which is very significant for the fact that Winter and Willow are represented by these shadows. They are presences in Weiss's life, but there is no warmth. There is no comfort there, making Weiss's life a lot more cold and alone. But as someone did point out in the comments of my review, there is one source of warmth in Weiss's mansion, and that is Klein. Klein in Weiss's dream world is represented in a number of different ways. We've seen 5 separate versions of Klein, as, he's meant to symbolize the 7 dwarves, so there's going to be 7 different versions of him overall. Hopefully we'll see the last 2, but Klein is one of the people that Weiss actually thinks very highly of. In the dream world, there is a Klein in charge of every aspect of society. In charge of the factory, in charge of the police force, in charge of the prison cell, keeping the miscreants under control, the dummies locked away in their silly's jail, and is also the only one trusted to not only carry Weiss's weapon, but also carry Winter, the rulebook that Weiss follows, probably the most important thing in that dream to Weiss, her sister. And that is where I think the core of the dream and a large part of the conflict of Ice Queendom is going to come from. This book represented by Winter. There are a few things that I'm going to cover in a separate video regarding that book, but it is very telling that Klein is in every aspect of this, and is also the only source of warmth in Weiss's household. The candle that is at the center of the table is a Klein. And I'm still not sure which of the 7 dwarves this Klein is meant to represent, but it is a source of light, a source of warmth within Weiss's life, within the cold, dark interior of this Schnee manor. But it is fleeting almost. Nothing but a flickering flame on the table and a pair of floating gloves. Nothing that really holds that much presence, which could be very telling about how Weiss thinks about Klein, that he is a light, that he is warmth, but also doesn't really hold that much presence in the mansion. Especially when you compare the Klein that is the flame, the one that doesn't really hold that much presence, to the other Kleins that we have seen. The leader of the entire Schnee factory, the leader of the police force, even the door to the Silly's jail, each of them get physical bodies that are robotic, that have, physical form, but the Klein inside the mansion, it's not the same for, which to me is very telling about how Weiss views Klein, capable of doing all of these different things, and is the one who largely cares for her, but is still not like a solid presence in her life. And I'm curious to know how you guys interpret that, because there might be more to delve into there. It's just, I'm not a psychologist or anything, so I'm curious to know what you guys think. And then we get to the last of the Schnee siblings, Whitley. He is represented as a bat, a rat with wings, almost. A pest of sorts. Although bats are actually very useful for getting rid of mosquitoes and controlling bug populations, but I'm guessing they're not going for that aspect of it as a representation of Whitley in Weiss's dream. He is, I think, more meant to represent a small creature that doesn't really have much physical presence in Weiss's life, but is something always lurking in the shadows, criticizing Weiss, and, as was pointed out in the comments of my review as well, a presence that is hanging from the ceiling, looking down on Weiss from a similar standing to Jacques. Though, Whitley doesn't have as much presence as Jacques in Weiss's life, obviously, he's still looking down on Weiss from approximately the same level. When Jacques appears over Weiss inside that dining room, he is criticizing Weiss, says nothing of Whitley. Whitley's the perfect child, but Weiss is the one that receives all the criticism, and Whitley is just there snickering. A small presence that is always there, annoying, criticizing, and yet he is also the only member of Weiss's family that is given a physical body in this episode. Jacques is nothing but posters, statues, and a hologram. Willow is a shadow. Winter is in a book, still a shadow. Klein is a bunch of robots. But Whitley actually is flesh and blood. Yeah, he's a bat, but still has a physical presence of sorts. So I think that is telling that Weiss does care for her brother to some extent, at least, or she wants to care for him, if not for his, attitude and suck-uppish nature to Jacques, but still, it's interesting to see how he is represented in contrast to the other members of the Schnee family. And there is one more member of the Schnee family that we still have to cover. One that we've never actually seen in the RWBY series, one that has long since passed. Nicholas Schnee, the founder of the Schnee Dust Company. In this dream, there is a salute that every drone seems to give, as well as the members of the Schnee family give to each other as a greeting. They salute each other by saying Big Nicholas, in reverence almost to Nicholas Schnee, the founder of the Schnee Dust Company, and in Weiss's dream, likely the founder of the Ice Queendom itself. This shows how much Weiss looks up to Nicholas Schnee, looks up to her grandfather. I don't know if Weiss actually met her grandfather, but I'd like to imagine that because of this closeness that Weiss feels to her grandfather, that maybe he did actually live long enough to see Weiss as a child. Maybe only living to the point of when Weiss was 5 years old, and at that point Jacques was able to take over the company because Nicholas passed away. But in those early years of Weiss's life, maybe he was a very kind presence to her. Someone that had all of this power as the leader of the Schnee Dust Company, but was still kind-hearted, warm, and was the father that Jacques never was. I'd like to think that that would be the case, or at least that's how I'd like to imagine it. Because, for sure, Nicholas Schnee passed away before Weiss's 10th birthday. Because Jacques would never have come out and openly said that, I just married you for the company if Nicholas Schnee was still alive. Nicholas had to have passed by that point in time, and Jacques was now in control of the company, and there was nothing that the rest of the Schnee family could do about it. But I think for a certain time before that, I think it's entirely possible that Nick could have been alive and did have an influence on Weiss's life in a positive way. Something that made her look up to him so much. And it's very apparent that Weiss wants to continue his legacy. That she wants to carry on the Schnee Dust Company for him, not for Jacques. Unfortunately, a lot of her personality in Volume 1 is derived from Jacques' influence and not Nicholas Schnee's influence, but I think at her core, she does want to do right by the Schnee Dust Company. She disapproves of a lot of her father's actions. Again, represented in this dream world by the way that Jacques treats his employees. That the way to progress is to have workers perform cheap labor, telling them that they should be enjoying their life working for the Schnee Dust Company, working like slaves, and taking all the profits for himself. There is a lot to the dynamic of Ice Queendom and how Weiss views each individual within that world. At least each individual that's given their own presence. Her family being the most prominent of those, and it is very telling of Weiss's upbringing, how she was raised, and how she views her family life. the absent presence of her mother and sister, and the overwhelming criticism and judgment that she receives from her father, the pestering and annoyance of her brother, and as well the way that she looks up to her grandfather and the presence of Klein, how much faith she puts in him to run everything in her empire. There's a lot to delve into here, probably a lot that I'd missed, so let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. How do you think the representation of Weiss's family in Ice Queendom, in Weiss's dream, is representative of how she feels about them? Do you mostly agree with the things that I said, or do you have some other thoughts of your own? If there's anything I missed, please feel free to let me know. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did want to see more like it, more Ice Queendom coverage, and more RWBY theories and videos in general, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.